Tatum's referencing Aristotle's theory of friendship. Had you ever heard of this theory before? It was the first time I had ever.
Okay, welcome back to Straight Up Book Club. Okay, we are talking about Like Happiness by Ursula Villarreal-Moura. So, first half of this book. Okay, I'm really liking this book so much. I love the structure of this book. I'm so excited to talk about it. It's written in this really interesting way. It's like the whole thing is like a letter to someone in a way, right? So I'm excited to talk about it. Tell us what's happened, Heather.
I shall. I agree. I have been loving it too. The letter writing is cool because then you get that like second person for a little bit, which I feel is like super rare in literature. I shouldn't say it's super rare, at least like in more contemporary stuff. But it's kind of funny because the last book we read had two separate timelines and we were very divided on what one, not divided, but like we definitely liked one timeline over the other. This one for me, they were equally immersive. Like I love the two different timelines. But essentially in this one, we start in 2015 and Tatum, who's a 30-something Mexican-American woman, is living in Chile with her girlfriend when she gets an email from a New York Times journalist asking about a previous relationship with writer M. Dominguez. And he's this like Latino writer who has written this book called Happiness, which I love because it's like ladders up to this book, which is called Like Happiness. And essentially, this journalist is reaching out to her because another woman has come forward about his abuse. And they don't really get specific into like what exactly happened, but there's I think some threads of like, or some themes of like sexual abuse that has happened there with this woman. And essentially, she had mentioned Tatum's name in her account, wondering if she might also be a victim. And Tatum kind of like agrees to talk with the journalist, but she does preempt this by saying that there was like no abuse in the relationship with him. And she's like, I'll still tell you about our history and everything that happened, but I just want you to know that like we had a friendship and there was no abuse there. So Tatum then begins this account of her history with Mateo, and this is the area where it's directed at him in this like second person narrative, and it starts with her sending him fan mail over his novel Happiness. She is very young. She's like beginning her college years in Massachusetts. She's originally from San Antonio, but she moves to Massachusetts because she wants to be where all of her like favorite writers are from. Like she mentions Sylvia Plath a lot, and that's a big reason why she wanted to go to school there. But essentially she sends him fan mail over his novel Happiness, and this starts this relationship that turns into phone calls. Then it turns into like a fling in a house in Cape Cod where Tatum is like hired to house sit, and they do have sex once there when they're at that house, but she says that was like the only time that they were ever intimate. Afterwards, Tatum graduates from college in Massachusetts and she moves to New York in hopes of being closer to Mateo because that's where he lives. And while she's there, she lives at a nun's residence with another young woman and develops a crush on her. Her name is Mayumi, who teaches her Japanese, and she tells Mateo about this crush and he becomes like really hostile towards her. And the first half of this book ends with essentially Mateo mocking this relationship, and we see Tatum and Mayumi on the couch. They're watching Spirited Away. Tatum like makes a move and Mayumi essentially like rejects her, and that's where this half ends.
That was like so efficient.
I'm trying to be more efficient because I feel like I mentioned things. I'm like, this doesn't matter. You can't say everything that happened.
No, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like, it's so interesting. I was like, when I was reading this, I was like, all of this has happened already. It's kind of like Long Island Compromise, right? Like we are, like the trauma's happened, she's processing it, and now we're sort of like living her retelling it, kind of, right? Like she's sort of reliving it in a way. It's interesting too. Okay, so this book, okay, I love books that transport me to like a time in my life, and this one did that so well. Yeah. And I feel like Come and Get It did the same thing, right? I was talking a lot about how I was reliving my like college years, and similar to that in this one for me, I was like just kind of thinking about that time as like, you know, an early 20-something year old who's like who loves books, who's like fascinated with the idea of being able to have any sort of friendship dynamic with authors, right? Like I remember like in university I would go to poetry readings a lot, or like book readings a lot, and just like being able to interact with authors was really cool. So yeah, so I just wanted to say like I appreciated that aspect of this book, just like transporting. And I wonder, you know, did you have any sort of feelings like that? Like this is such a relatable sort of setting of like this parasocial relationship that you develop. Of course, not everyone reaches out and gets to the point of like developing an actual relationship, but it's like that part of it is really interesting and relatable.
Absolutely. I felt like I related to Tatum so much. And it started with like some of her favorite authors. I mean, she mentions like Sylvia Plath and the Bell Jar, and why she wanted to like go to this school in particular because she wanted to be close to like the psychiatric hospital where she had stayed. And she like fantasizes about having like tuna sandwiches like Sylvia, and I can't remember what her friend's name is in the book, but you know, the two of them like having lunch together in this like really dismal setting. But for some reason, like Tatum kind of romanticizes it a little bit. And she talks about like Murakami and Twin Peaks and Northern Exposure and all these things that are like her favorite things. I'm like, those are my favorite things too. Like these are, you know, I don't know. A lot of her love of literature, I definitely felt like I really loved, but also just like her desire to just be home and read all the time over literally everything else. Like I remember as a kid being made fun of because I'd always say that I had a headache, but I guess I said it in a British voice because a kid down the road would make fun of me, be like, you got a headache, do you have a headache? So I don't know what I was saying. I don't know why I was putting on a British accent, but I would always be, they'd be like, want to come out and play? I'm like, I have a headache, and I just like go to my room and read. And I feel like Tatum does that all the time in this book, which is probably a horrible thing to admit because it makes me sound as insufferable as I am and as she can be at times, as much as I love her. There's another moment too when she's moving into the nunnery and there's this like girl that wants to be her friend, and she's like, come to my room. And so Tatum's like, fine. And she goes to her room and she sits down and she sees like all these Bibles in the room, but then also like an Elmo sleeping bag. And she's like, wait, I can actually like decide who I'm friends with now. And she just goes, I'm just gonna leave. And she leaves the room, which is something I don't think I would be able to do, but I just kind of loved that about her in that moment.
I love that. It's like, it reminds me of how like you see all these like TikTok videos where someone's like, I just like reminded myself that like you remember that you have free will and you do something really silly because you know you're just like so programmed to like be a certain way, and that means being polite in certain settings and being like, I have to like see out this interaction, but you really don't. You know, you can peace out if you need to.
How? I don't know. I mean, she really just pieced out. She was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this, and left the room, and more power to her.
You have a headache. Works every time.
I have a headache. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like in adulthood, it's a harder excuse to use. Maybe I do need to use that more often. Oh my gosh. Sorry, this is a tangent, but I was watching a show the other day. I'm obsessed with BritBox. It's like totally my my subscription of choice. And there's a show that I watch called The...
What's BritBox?
Did I bring this up on the last episode too? It's a subscription for like British television.
Okay.
As I admitted that I put on a British accent as a child.
That's funny.
I'm not even drinking. This is a non-alcoholic, like dark and stormy. Shout out to Bandit Brewery.
It's a cute label.
It's so cute. There's a little raccoon on it. Look. I don't know if I can. Oh, there we go.
Oh, that's
Anyways.
cute.
Yeah, it's a subscription for British shows. It's just all British shows. But there's one show that I love. It's like, it's so low stakes. It's just about people who have a cafe near the ocean. And anyways, none of this matters. There's a scene where someone asks this old lady if she wants to like go to a party. She goes, I can't. I'm getting my hair washed. And Greg looked at me and he's like, Heather, it is that easy. It really is that easy to say no. Moving on. Tatum, love her. Also felt like I was thrust back in time to university. We're like, okay, I feel like we both did arts degrees, right? Like you did communications, I did English. I feel like there's a level of pretension that comes with it. And like in hindsight, I think it correlates with like the level of insecurity that, you know, we're all probably feeling at that age, and we're trying to seem smarter than we are. And we're just kind of like putting on these airs. And it feels a little bit like Tatum sometimes does that. And now I actually like regret saying that she sometimes seems like smarter than she is, because she is like a very smart person. But, and Mateo, I think, takes advantage of that and makes it seem like she's less than. But I don't know. I do think that there's a level of pretension there that felt very like relatable for that period of time.
Yeah, 100%. I also feel like that, like, I was feeling that as well. And the parts I was feeling that the most was when she's working at this restaurant and she has sort of her friends there, like Debbie and Jessie, who is, it's interesting. Like when she's like trying to get that job, she's like, they're like, we really want someone who'll go to happy hour with us and like after our shifts. And she really doesn't want to, but also needs the job. So kind of, you know, ends up going with them essentially. So she does have these moments where she's hanging out with them. But what struck me was that she's kind of talking down to them in a way. Like she's almost like defensive with them. I don't know if you felt that, but I really felt like, you know, that's a moment where she's putting on airs, and like she gets called out by them too, where she uses the word thus. And it's like, who uses the word thus in like everyday conversation? And they're like, yo, what does that even mean? Which is hilarious. And then there's another point where I think, Jessie says, Tatum pretends to like us, but she's in college. So it's almost like,
yeah,
I don't know. She is talking down to them, and she doesn't fully like want to open up to them in this way. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I noticed that also when she becomes a TA at that school, and she goes out for drinks with like some of the teachers, and when she's out with them, she's being like really standoffish. I can't remember what she says to them, but she's being like very moody and standoffish with all of them. And then the teacher that she's TAing for essentially makes a comment like, oh, don't worry about Tatum, like she's always like that. And then when they leave, she kind of pulls Tatum aside and is like, you know, you need to like pretend to like people or something along those lines. So it's very obvious that she's always kind of like putting on these condescending airs around people. But then it's also interesting because I find that there's obviously these big themes on like race and identity for Tatum. But did you find it interesting that she really latches on to Mateo's book Happiness because it like speaks to her as a Latina, and she, you know, always talks about the fact that she, you know, loves how he can really, you know, capture the life of a Latin American. But then at the same time, she also like decides to go to the school in Massachusetts, like up north, and like kind of like rejects her home in San Antonio. She never visits home, never goes to see her parents. Like, did you find that kind of interesting that there's this theme of her like latching onto her roots, but then also kind of like pushing away from them as much as possible too?
Yeah. And I actually find that really relatable, as I totally picked up on that. And it's like, it feels very like contradictory, right? But I also understand it because it feels like, I think it goes back to, you know, she's not seeing this representation. And when she does feel seen. But at the same time, everything else is where she's not being represented. And you start to sort of normalize that. And like, whether it's conscious or unconscious, assimilate to that. And like, I mean, like, I feel like I've done that. And then you sort of start to create like a distance between, you know, like you just said, like your roots in a way, because you kind of want to be what you see, if that makes sense. And so maybe there's an element of that. Like at first I was sort of seeing this as is it a bit of like self-hatred? But I think it's more sort of nuanced than that. I think it's like, you don't even understand that you're doing it. You know, it's so like, it becomes like deeply rooted because of just, Yeah.
I think actually what you just said is a really good point. Like if you're only ever seeing white people do the thing, I mean, like a variation of what you just said, but like white people do the thing that you want to be, which is essentially, you know, she wants to work in an art gallery or be an artist. And she even mentions earlier on that like all of the artists of note are like white Europeans from years ago, you know, like no one ever talks about like Latino or Latina artists. She goes, I think she says something like, oh, Frida Kahlo, but that's the only person that people ever think about or discuss. It's always like one person, and she sees that with like Mateo as well.
And it's almost as if she sees her ambition as being linked to that. Like there's also a moment when her dad or her parents are sort of excited for her that she got this job, and she's like unhappy that they're excited, and she's like, oh, like they see this as like the career, and that stuck out to me. It's like, well, you can still be excited for your kid having, you know, a job and like their first big job or whatever, right? Like it doesn't have to mean like, oh, this is it for you. You can change your mind later or do, you know, what you think are great things later on, but that doesn't mean like those aren't mutually exclusive, right? But I think she has this like intense judgment in that moment, and I think that's cool for this character to be so like contradictory in those ways.
It's true to the like being like a 20-something. Like I think your life is full of contradictions. I think that's the case throughout all of life, but especially at that age when you're still like in a period of self-discovery.
There's like something I want to talk about, which is like how Mateo has been sort of grooming her in a way. I guess you could call it grooming. And I wanted to ask what you thought about like maybe him calling her mi vida the entire time is like an aspect of that. But basically, you know, she's gotten to this point over the course of their relationship where she thinks that no one else understands their bond. You know, there's this level of control that, you know, she articulates it as like, I've kept everyone else out. But I don't think she like had that control ever to like create this contained space for Mateo and her. It was Mateo doing that, but making her think that she was doing it. You know what I mean? And I think that's so like that manipulation is described really well.
I feel like that's such a key trait in like gaslighting too. When like you convince the other person that everything you're doing is their idea. This whole first half of the book felt very like just gross. You know what I mean? Like it very much reminds me of the Mark and Margot relationship where it's like you have this figure who's essentially like a teacher. Like this is a book that Tatum has loved for years. She sees this as like a reflection of herself and her identity, and she really looks up to this person who's written it. And now she has sent him fan mail, expressed her love of it, and then he takes that and turns it into like a relationship. Like that's so gross. She does have a moment of clarity when she's talking about Mayumi, because Mayumi's teaching her Japanese, and she goes, I guess I have a thing for teachers. So like she's kind of aware that there's a little bit of this like power dynamic there, because even though Mateo is not actually her teacher, she's admitting that he's taught her a lot throughout her life. So there is that weird imbalance, and she is aware of it even at that point. And yeah, like the whole thing is just like so freaking gross to me. And then these like emails that turn into phone calls, that like just the way it progresses just feels like grossly familiar, because it's this trope of a man who's grooming, you know, a young woman. And unfortunately, that is a theme that comes up again and again in books and movies, because it's a theme that comes up in real life too. So yeah, it's I don't know if that answered any of your question, but I agree with the whole like grooming aspect. I don't even know if it was a question, but
yeah. No, you're exactly right. Like that's it did feel gross, and it did feel like real. You know, this is how people prey on people's vulnerabilities, right? And see, you know, some form of infatuation as being an opportunity, right? And that's exactly what he did here. And framed the entire thing as like, I love you, I care about you, strung her along. She's hoping to develop a relationship with him. And, you know, like they have sex, but they don't really, you know, that doesn't continue. But she's always like hoping that it will. And like his whole thing is like, it's for you. Like, you know, it's for you that we're not going to be in a relationship. And I mean, that part of it too is just like so manipulative, such like gaslighting.
It just keeps her guessing. Like, what is this relationship? Are you my teacher? Are you my lover? Are you my best friend? Like, it really blurs the lines where nothing really makes sense here. Are you my idol and I'm your muse? Like, it's a very strange relationship that doesn't really have a definition for Tatum because it's not really fitting into any category right now. I did have one question. I thought that this was really interesting. And it can be a quickie. So there's a moment when Tatum's referencing Aristotle's theory of friendship. Had you ever heard of this theory before? It was the first time I had ever. I thought I knew Aristotle so well. But essentially he has this theory that there's 3 different kinds of friendship, and it's on the basis of utility, pleasure, and good. And I'm curious, it kind of had me thinking, like, is this accurate? Like, I don't know. So I'm curious to know, like, what do you think of this theory? Like, do you think it's legitimate? And what type of friendship do you think Mateo and Tatum have, if there is one of them? And can the type be different for 2 people in one relationship? Could you be someone who has someone for utility and the other person has you for good? Like, anyway, sorry. I just asked you like 5 questions, so say whatever you want.
That's what I do every time too. I like ask a question and then
like,
keep
going. I don't know if that was
talking.
a question.
So that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that before. I actually didn't realize that Aristotle had theories of friendship. But okay, so if I'm understanding this right, like there's, you know, the good friendship that's almost like altruistic, right? And it's about the other person. And then there's a utility one, which is more sort of, like there where it's like business, maybe like we're
maybe
both
coworkers. Yeah. Or you're getting something out of it.
Exactly. And then the third one is
pleasure.
Pleasure.
Like
you just have like you just have like shared interests maybe. And but okay, so what I'm struggling with is that I think that a friendship has elements of all of those, doesn't it? Like you always have the pleasure part because you're probably friends because you have shared interests, right? And then there might be moments where you have utility, like, you know, you do favors for each other.
I think that would be the marker of a good friendship. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people who just like act as certain parts of this, or who are more heavy in one area than another, kind of like the love languages. It's like you might have like 3 out of the 5 or 2, but you kind of like lean a little heavier in one or the other. It actually ladders up. I keep referencing this book, but it's so good, called The Science of Stuck, and it does talk about how everyone needs, she has this like cross for friendships, and how you need, like, in all of your relationships that you have, you need to be a little bit of, like, you need somewhere you're a little bit more of a mentor, a little bit more of a mentee, somewhere you are a little bit more, oh my gosh, I can't even remember what the other 2 are, but it's something to do with like giving and taking, and how you almost need to have like a little bit from each category, because you're never going to have a fully balanced relationship at all times. And we talked about this with, I think it was like Brene Brown, and even like your partnership, where it's like you're never going to be 50-50. Sometimes you might be like 70-30 or 20-80 or whatever, like depending on what time you're in your life. The point is finding that balance, and I think a good friendship is always a good balance of those 3 things. That would be my theory, Aristotle, not one or the other. But I do think that there are probably people in our lives where it's like you are really just that one thing. But I did think it was an interesting theory. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I do think that in the relationship with Mateo and Tatum, that because there is this imbalance, I like, in my perspective, it probably is more like utility for him and more like pleasure for her. But then I think there's also pleasure for him and like maybe good for her. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love your like understanding of that and how you're phrasing it, because the sort of like strict categorization is probably what I was struggling with, but the way you sort of explain that makes a lot more sense to me. I think you're right. Like, he definitely like is approaching this from that utility standpoint. For her, I think it might just be good. I'm not sure, because like, or actually maybe you're right. It might be the other one, the pleasure one, because the reason she was attracted to him, or yeah, was because she saw herself. But then that brings me to utility. Yeah. Like the representation, that's utility. So I don't know. I don't know if it fits cleanly.
I'm starting to believe your original theory, which is that like, isn't every relationship a little bit of all of those things in some, whatever the percentages are, it is made up of those three and it's not all one.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
guess.
Yeah. I like the idea of it being like little sort of, what's the word? Like battery percentage, sort of, a little bit of this, like you said, like 20%, 30%, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's it for this one. I'm excited to read the second half and talk about it.
Yeah, me too. Okay. We'll catch you next time and talk about the next half.
See you at book club.
Bye.
Bye.